Everyone has a comfort game, that game they always return to, the one they can always count on to bring a smile to their face or provide some comfort, whether they need it or not. I've always loved Mario games, whether they were 2D or 3D, but I never connected with any of them as much as I did with Super Mario Galaxy. I never had much time to play games growing up, maybe a half hour here or there, but despite that, I always returned to Mario Galaxy. Every time I called in sick from school, which was admittedly not very often, I would spend the entire day playing this game. And then, when the day was over, my mom would always bring home Mary Browns for supper. Believe it or not, Nitro Rat doesn't have a monopoly on being Nova Scotian, so yeah, Mary Browns played a big role in my life too. But that led to me secretly nicknaming sick days to Mario Browns days. It's weird to think back on that time of my life and realize that Galaxy played as big a role as it did. For a long time, I never thought I even had a comfort game, yet here it was, sitting right in front of me the whole time. Super Mario Galaxy released for the Wii on the 1st of November 2007. It wasn't until nearly 13 years later that it saw a new release in the form of Super Mario 3D All-Stars on the Switch. Galaxy is featured as the third and final game in the collection, which is kind of fitting considering what Nintendo was trying to achieve with this game. Super Mario Galaxy is Mario at a grand scale. The previous game had focused in on a single island, a single community in Mario's world. This time, they were exploring the entire universe. This wasn't meant to be a massively large game by any means. They weren't blowing anyone out of the water with the size of its levels or exploring the ins and outs of every galaxy. They reinforced the grand scale of the game completely through its theme, throwing Mario into outer space and sending him on a journey through the stars. This was also the first time Nintendo employed an orchestra for Mario's music, which, by the way, is absolutely incredible. The amount of emotion jammed into the score for this game is beyond anything the Mario franchise had seen up until this point, and in my opinion, remained unmatched until Mario Odyssey. The Mario Galaxy Orchestra consisted of about 50 people. The intention behind it was to create a sound that would allow players to feel the magnificence of the universe in the game. And it really works! The small collection of instruments and synthesizers heard in the soundtracks of previous Mario games, like 64 and Sunshine, pale in comparison to the grandeur of the symphonic orchestra used in Mario Galaxy. It's that sound that's the first thing the player will experience after beginning the game. The soft chimes ringing in the background as they read a children's storybook explaining the Star Festival, a celebration that's held every 100 years by the citizens of the Mushroom Kingdom to celebrate the appearance of a brilliant comet. The music transitions into a soft flute, and then orchestral strings as the game thrusts you into the Mushroom Kingdom, sending you on the path to Peach's castle, the courtyard now larger and more populated than ever before. And then Bowser attacks, destroying the courtyard and crystallizing the toads before assailing the princess at her castle and declaring the creation of his own new galaxy. Then, summoning a flying saucer, Bowser abducts Peach's castle and the princess along with it. Luckily, Mario's managed to hitch a ride. That is, until Kamek uses his magic to blast Mario back into orbit. We then see a flash of light as Bowser's ship warps into the distance, and the silver Luma that was accompanying Peach pursues Mario. The pair then find themselves on a small green planet somewhere in Earth's orbit. This is the first time you get to run around on a weird non-flat surface, which is the basic gimmick of Super Mario Galaxy. The inspiration for this comes from a little tech demo called Super Mario 128. If you're familiar with Nintendo's history, you probably already recognize this, but in case you don't, Mario 128 was a tech demo shown at Nintendo's Space World event in August of 2000. It featured 128 Marios running around interacting with objects and each other on a disc that morphed into a whole bunch of weird shapes. This tech demo went on to inspire several other Nintendo games as well, including Metroid Prime, Twilight Princess, and Pikmin. In Mario Galaxy, planets can be all sorts of weird shapes and sizes, leaving you to navigate platforming challenges from all kinds of weird angles. 3D platforming games are already known for sometimes being disorienting, so throwing in what's basically a whole other dimension to navigate seems unnecessarily challenging, especially for a Mario game. But Galaxy doesn't actually end up being more difficult than its counterparts, and it certainly doesn't feel clunky or unfair, so what's going on here? Well, there are a few things that Nintendo did to combat the disorientation caused by this kind of platforming. The first, and probably the most obvious, is the addition of Mario's new spin attack. It's not hard to see why jumping and landing on enemies would be drastically more difficult in an environment like this. Instead of doing that, you can now spin into an enemy to knock them down and run into them to kick them away. The spin attack can even be used in the air to give yourself a little bit more airtime, letting you adjust just a little bit so you can make your landings a little more accurate without giving you the advantage of a full-on double jump. It's also important to note here that this move used motion controls in its original release on the Wii. On the Switch, this is still true, but since the two controller types on the Switch are so drastically different than the Wii, Galaxy ends up controlling a little differently than the previous entry in the series. First of all, you can now use the Y button to spin, instead of shaking the controller if you prefer. It's a little touch, but one I really appreciated. Secondly, you might notice that unlike the GameCube, the Wii Remote and Nunchuck Wombo combo only comes with one joystick. Yeah, so after all of my complaints about the camera controls in Mario 64, it looks like we're about to venture back into that hellscape. But luckily for us, looks can be deceiving. The camera follows Mario extremely well in Galaxy. Adjusting the camera manually works the same way as in Mario 64, in that the camera can be moved left and right into preset angles. The thing about that is that I almost never ended up having to use it. The levels in Mario Galaxy are usually designed in such a way that multiple camera angles aren't really necessary, and when they are necessary, the camera adjusts itself so well that I usually wouldn't want to change it anyway. On top of that, Mario's movement is mostly relative to the camera. If you're running somewhere and the camera swings around dramatically, Mario will keep moving in his current direction to prevent situations where you end up flying off of some platform because the camera moved and now Mario wants to run some other direction. Stop moving, however, and the controls will reset to be relative to the camera. That way, anytime the player initiates some sort of movement, all they have to do is push the joystick in the direction they want to go. All the other controls from the Wii are ported over one-to-one. Pointing the Wii Remote at the screen to pick up star bits and interact with things like pull stars is now handled by the gyro in your Joy-Con or Pro Controller. And if you're playing on the Switch Lite or in mobile mode, you can just use the touchscreen. Even mini-games like ball rolling or manta racing take advantage of the Switch's gyro. But we'll get to those later. Galaxy does a really good job of subtly adjusting mechanics to give players new and less disorienting options for tackling objectives. Sure, it does get a little bit disorienting sometimes, but it's incredibly rare and never as drastic as you might expect. Even the challenge design is done in such a way as to ease up on the player when they're put into awkward places. The game never doubles down on difficulty when you're already a little disoriented. After introducing us to the controls by having Mario chase rabbits across this small planet, we meet Rosalina, who's been watching over us from the gateway to the starry sky. She entrusts us with the care of a Luma so we can have the ability to travel through space and rescue Princess Peach. Not long after, it's revealed that the comet that passes by every 100 years is actually an observatory and home to Rosalina and the Lumas. This time, however, some strange force latched onto the observatory and pulled away all of their power stars, which give the observatory its ability to travel across the universe. It turns out this strange force was Bowser, and after obtaining the power stars, he discovered the power to cross the universe. Rosalina asks you to help her track down and recover power stars that are scattered across space in order to restore power to the observatory and chase down Bowser. In total, there are 120 stars to be found across the universe, just like in Super Mario Sunshine. Finding them is also pretty similar to the previous games. Go through the hub world to pick a level, choose a star to get, and then go get it. Where it starts to differ from the previous games is in the design of the hub world. The observatory isn't intrinsically tied to the levels you can access from within it like Delfino Plaza is in Mario Sunshine, and you don't get to delve deeper into a massive building like you do in 64. Instead, you visit each of the 6 observatory domes that are scattered across the ship and choose levels, and then stars, from there. In the end, the observatory feels a bit less like part of the world and more like a level select screen. If you think about it, that kind of makes sense too. The observatory isn't actually part of the world, and if they're going to travel somewhere, they're gonna have to choose a destination on a screen. It's not like a car where you can just drive down the road. They're traveling between entire galaxies. But all of that aside, I still really enjoy the observatory as a hub world. It's really pretty, and the music that plays in the background while you're here is absolutely gorgeous. It's here, by the way, that you can visit the library and read Rosalina's storybook. It tells the story of how she became the mother of the Lumas, and it's really heart-touching. It's also pretty easy to pass up on reading it when you're playing the game. I'm not going to spoil the story here, but if you do play, please read the storybook. Each of the observatory domes contains 4 galaxies, and of those 4 galaxies, 2 or 3 of them will have 6 stars to collect, with the remaining 1 or 2 serving as little challenge levels with only 1 star, barring a couple of exceptions. These galaxies can be specific worlds where missions take place, or they can just serve as a theme for a collection of fairly disconnected challenges. Either way, they're going to be home to 6 power stars. 3 of those power stars are your regular everyday objectives. They have a pretty basic setup that changes how the area looks and makes the goal of the level fairly clear. Most of these kinda ditch the open world collectathon vibe that the previous 2 games aim to achieve in favor of a light return to the course clear goal structure of the 2D Mario games. If you don't know what I mean by that, most collectathon games are open world 3D platformers where you have to search an area for a multitude of collectible items. The definition on this one is pretty fuzzy because collectathon games structure themselves pretty loosely at times, but some recent examples include games like A Hat in Time or Ukulele. Course clear, on the other hand, is usually found in 2D games. They place you at the beginning of a level and have you make your way through to the end. Think something like Celeste, Rayman, or, like I said before, the 2D Mario games. The thing about the hybrid structure of levels in Super Mario Galaxy is that they accomplish simple goal-based objectives without giving up the feeling that 3D Mario games usually have. These levels all use a mix of obstacle course style challenge levels, small open areas, and branching paths to accomplish a course clear design without sacrificing the explorative feeling of other 3D Mario games. This feeling is, in my opinion, essential to the core of most 3D platformers in general, and it's something that one of the 3D Mario games ended up losing. But we'll get to that when we get to it. One of these 3 levels in each galaxy will also contain a secret hidden star. They usually just require you to go out of your way and explore parts of the level that aren't along the path to the goal. A couple of them also ask you to track down Luigi. You see, Mario isn't alone in his hunt for the power stars. Luigi has been helping in the background. At some point though, he got trapped in this haunted mansion. No, not that. This haunted mansion. After you rescue him, he'll show up in the observatory, and if you talk to him after that, he'll go back to searching for power stars. The only problem is, he gets stuck a couple times. Whenever that happens, Mail Toad will give you a letter from Luigi with a picture of his whereabouts, and it's up to you to go out and rescue him again. Classic Luigi. Occasionally, an additional star will become available at each regular galaxy due to the interference of something called a Prankster Comet. These modify one of the levels in the galaxy to add some sort of challenge or difficulty, and always come in one of 4 different varieties, which range from simple speedrun challenges to single-hit boss fights. Prankster Comets are pretty awesome, dude. None of them are too difficult or unfair, they just kinda shake things up in interesting ways. Having you go back and repeat a previous level with an additional modification to make it slightly more difficult is a really great implementation of bonus challenges. The fact that they scale up in difficulty but keep the objectives reasonable is what really sells me on them. It's all too often that games feature challenges like speedrunning a level that make the objective nigh impossible to complete, or otherwise don't change it in any meaningful or interesting way. Galaxy is definitely not like this. None of these modifications are so insanely difficult as to make the challenge unfair, and when there isn't much of an impact on difficulty, it's still a fun and interesting experience. Also, they fixed 100 coin stars. Yeah, the mad lads over at Nintendo finally went and done it. They took 100 coin stars and they made them good. You actually can't get any of these until you beat the final boss and one other level in the game. But once you do that, purple comets will start showing up on every galaxy. They work the same way as the regular Prankster Comets in that you go to the galaxy and it'll offer you a modified version of one of the levels. You never have to figure out if one of the levels in a galaxy doesn't have enough coins like you did in the previous 2 games, and you never have to run around tracking down secret hiding spots for every coin, only to risk losing one off an edge somewhere and ruining any chance you had at getting the star, dooming yourself to start over. The purple comets spawn in 100 or more purple coins and either scatter them across the level or challenge you to collect all 100 before reaching a certain time limit. None of the coins are hidden in secret objects or held by enemies. They're all out in the open and just require you to run around and explore the entire area to find them all. This is all it took to solve my complaints about the 100 coin stars in Mario 64 and Sunshine. The problem with those objectives in the previous games were that they felt like a complete afterthought, like nobody actually designed any aspect of a level with those in mind. But in Galaxy, not only did they design the level with those in mind, the 100 coin stars get their own level setup. The coins are now all placed in logical places, and when it's not possible to just throw a player into a level and have them explore to find the coins, they're converted into their own challenge. Either way, it's a massive improvement. Purple coin stars don't feel like endless tedium like their previous counterparts did. Instead, they feel like fun bonus challenges, adding an incentive to return to galaxies that you might have already finished. And aside from all of those other things, there's only one more type of star you can find in a regular galaxy: a green star. There are only 3 of these in the game, and they're found the same way you would find any regular secret star in a level. Just look for something out of the way. What makes these unique is that when you collect all 3, you unlock 3 more bonus levels. Each of these levels focuses in on one of the motion control minigames that are also scattered throughout the rest of the game. I imagine a lot of people will struggle with these. Motion controls aren't the most reliable of things, especially on the Switch. I swear to God, getting any of those gyro puzzles to work in Breath of the Wild is impossible. But all things considered, Galaxy doesn't do a terrible job. Take a look at this rolling ball minigame. Mario's standing on top of a ball and you have to balance him using the controller in order to get the ball to roll. The thing about it is that the controls, even though they're pretty reliable, are also really loose. It's tough to speed up and slow down, and if you accidentally build up too much speed, well, good luck correcting that. Plus, the rolling ball levels tend to have small enemies like Goombas roaming around along the way to the goal. If you bump into any of them, they get squashed and launch you into the air. The faster you're going when this happens, the further you'll be launched. So if you end up struggling with these controls just a little bit, it kinda starts to spiral out of control. Especially if you're like me, and the more attempts you make, the faster you try to finish and the more recklessly you play. And then there's Manta Racing. It's basically the same thing as the rolling ball, except you press A to move forward and tilt the controller side to side in order to steer. As long as you don't keep the A button jammed down the whole time, it's easy enough to slow down and turn corners pretty smoothly. But if you do keep it jammed down, the steering gets way looser. Add to that the course has waves just sloshing around the whole time, launching you into the air if you're going just a tiny bit too fast, and it's nearly impossible to keep control of this thing. Now, I'll admit, I never really struggled too hard with these. As long as you're patient, I don't think you'll have any issue with them. Even though some have a time limit, you'll probably come in well under that amount. That being said, motion controls have always been a weird thing for me. When a game is completely based around them, I normally have a blast. But when a game that doesn't normally use them tries to work them in somehow, it can go one of 2 ways. Either it's really impressive and enhances what the game already has going for it, or it slows the game to a crawl and takes me out of the experience. That's kinda how I felt with Galaxy. The rolling ball and Manta Racing minigames really do enhance the experience. I feel like they fit in really well with the platforming elements of the game, but the motion control aspect of them kinda takes away from the experience. There's just something about how loosely they handle that made them fit in kind of awkwardly with the rest of the gameplay. Now, thankfully, these motion controls are pretty rare. They do show up in other parts of levels here or there, but even as challenge levels, they're not very common. Take Hungry Lumas, for example. Outside of every observatory dome, there will be a large pink Luma waiting for you, provided you've collected enough power stars. If you interact with one, it'll ask you to feed it however many of the star bits you've been collecting along the way. Once it's full, it'll fly off and transform into a challenge level. Sometimes it'll use the motion control minigames, but most of the time, it won't. These levels aren't really any different from the challenges you'll find inside the observatory domes, but they do still serve their own purpose. See, as you play through the game, you'll find these little colorful crystal-type things scattered everywhere, almost in the same way that you'd expect to find coins in any other Mario game. They're just lying around and they pop out of enemies when you beat them up. But so far, coins have never really meant much, aside from needing 100 of them in a level to unlock an extra star. The difference here is that star bits can be collected anywhere and then delivered to one of these hungry dudes. It makes collecting star bits actually meaningful because it helps you progress toward completing the game. All that's left in the observatory domes, aside from the regular galaxies and hungry lumas, are the boss levels. These are exactly what they sound like. It's a short level with a boss at the end of it. It's actually kinda similar to the boss levels in Spyro the Dragon, come to think of it. That was my last video before this one, by the way. I'm told people really like it, so maybe you might wanna check it out. Anyway, these are pretty cool. It's nice to see a boss level that's more than just, go fight a dude. These ones always start out with a short platforming section, and then the boss fights themselves usually employ some mechanic that's introduced in the observatory dome the boss is found in. There are a few times where you'll end up just fighting Bowser, which predictably ends up being pretty similar each time, but that's more than made up for by the variety found in the other boss fights throughout the course of the game. These boss levels aren't even the only places where you end up fighting bosses. Regular Galaxies sometimes have boss levels of their own, where they follow a similar pattern of short platforming section followed by a boss fight that may or may not use a mechanic from earlier in that galaxy. The major difference between these bosses and the ones found in their own dedicated boss level galaxies is what kind of star they award you. Beating a major boss will always reward you with a grand star. These are the stars that are used to power the Comet Observatory. Every time you get one, a new dome will unlock. So you'll need a combination of regular power stars and grand stars in order to properly progress through the story. And that's my cue to let you know that the next part of this video is going to be riddled with spoilers. You can skip to the timestamp on screen if you don't want to see those. Okay, let's get to it. Once you've collected 60 total power stars, you can head off toward Peach's castle at the center of the universe. When you arrive, you find Peach being held captive by Bowser and Bowser Jr. Bowser once again declares that he's creating a new galaxy at the center of the universe, so he can rule a great galactic empire with Peach by his side forever. After one final fight, Mario beats Bowser once and for all, and he plummets into the lava below. With that, Mario saves the final grand star and kickstarts the implosion of Bowser's galaxy. The resulting supernova quickly turns into a supermassive black hole and begins vacuuming up everything in its vicinity, gaining mass until it eventually consumes the entire universe. Wow, okay, yeah, that got out of hand fast. You go into a Mario game expecting a happy-go-lucky story where the plumber comes out on top and everybody lives happily ever after, and then the game just throws all that back in your face like, psych, everybody in the universe is frickin' dead now. It's at this point that Rosalina appears to Mario and explains that the Lumas had sacrificed themselves to stop the black hole, scattering them across the universe, creating a new one in the process. But the cycle never repeats in exactly the same way, so you'll see. Mario, Peach, and Bowser awaken back in the newly recreated Mushroom Kingdom to celebrate the Star Festival with all of the friends Mario made on his journey. Roll credits. If you also happen to get all 120 power stars before beating the game, Rosalina thanks Mario for his help before heading off to travel the stars once again, leaving Mario's Luma companion behind. And yeah, that's it. I mean, I'm still pretty blown away that the resolution to the story was that the whole universe imploded in on itself and got replaced by a brand new one, but here we are. How do you even start to process a thing like that? Anyway, that's the end of the spoilers, I guess. Welcome back to anyone who skipped past the spoilers. The rest of this video is going to be pretty spoiler light, Luigi heavy, so strap in for that. After you collect all 120 stars and beat the game, you unlock Luigi as a playable character. Yeah, so now you get to go back and play Super Luigi Galaxy. Don't get too excited though, it's not a different game by any means. You literally just play the game again from the beginning, but as Luigi this time. Aside from subtle dialogue changes, the only real differences between Mario and Luigi are that Luigi loses more of his breath when he spins underwater, he can run slightly faster, jump slightly higher, and his controls are looser. It makes a tiny difference in how you would play the game, but honestly, it's nothing substantial. While I was writing this video, I spent a lot of time hanging out in the community Discord playing Super Luigi Galaxy, and my full thoughts basically just boil down to, it's a good excuse to play more Galaxy, but it's not any sort of mind-blowing experience. I wouldn't go out of my way for it if Galaxy wasn't already my comfort game. It would be super easy to find this repetitive if you decided to go back and play Super Luigi Galaxy just for completion's sake. Which brings us to the core issue here. Remember how I said you unlock Luigi after you collect all 120 power stars? Well, I mean, there are actually only 120 stars up until that point, but in reality, there are 121 stars for each character. In order to get that 121st star and 100% complete the game, you need to do it as Luigi as well. Yeah, so I'm not usually a completionist, but when it comes to platformers and collectathons, I almost always go out of my way to collect everything. Unless, of course, it doesn't feel like the game wants me to. I went on a rant about blue coins and coal rocks in the Sunshine video that kinda sums up my feelings on that. I might talk more about it in a future video, but for now, if you want more context, definitely check out Sunshine. Anyway, I'm not usually a completionist, but in games like Super Mario Galaxy, where it's a clear and achievable goal, I always go for the Hundo P. Problem is, in order to really get that in Super Mario Galaxy, you need to get every single star twice. Considering this game took me around 16 hours to beat the first time, doing it all over again just so I can get that one extra star and completion bonus is a monumental task. Remember, the game isn't any different when you play as Luigi, at least not in any significant way. Even the dialogue changes are really insubstantial, so is it worth getting all 242 stars? What? No, of course not. I mean, it's absolutely worth it to go back and play again as Luigi if you're just craving more Galaxy or revisiting an old save file, but to do it back to back just to say you completed it? I mean, it's a bit much, don't you think? I don't mean to call out any completionists that are watching either. I urge you to enjoy the games the way that you want to. As long as you're having a good time, that's all that matters. It's just wild to me that the game asks you to do everything twice just so you can get the reward that you do. That reward, by the way, is a really sweet letter from the developers thanking you for playing the game. It's also accompanied by 2 photos of the brothers with the princesses. I think these are really sweet touches, and I always appreciate any notes that developers leave in their games, though I can't help but feel I might be an outlier in that regard. I don't know, if you like the game, play it twice. I'm not your dad. Just know that it takes double the playtime to get, and it's not gonna change your life. Super Mario Galaxy was always my favorite Mario game when I was younger, and honestly, it's the first and possibly only one that I have genuine nostalgia for. It definitely has a lot more competition now that Odyssey is around, but since it's come to the Switch, it really holds up. It's weird for me to go back to these older Mario games. I've always thought of myself as a big Mario fan, but having taken the time to play the 3D All-Stars collection, I realized I never really did experience most of these games that I hold in such high regard. I'd love to see more ports and collections like this from Nintendo, with the caveat of permanent availability, even if it's just on the eShop. This short series of videos has gotten me to really examine how many of the games I love that I've actually experienced. And the result is, well, it turns out that I haven't really experienced most of the games that I identify with. Maybe someday I'll take a look back at those other franchises and do a similar thing with them. For now, I'm gonna take a little break from Mario and finish up my series on Spyro and The Last of Us, but we do still have more Mario to look at. And since Super Mario Galaxy is the only 3D Mario game to not have been ported to the Switch, looks like we're gonna have to break out the Wii. For now, I've been Cosmo. Thanks for watching.